We're on this computer. Okay, great. Share my screen again. And let's go ahead and get started. So, hi everyone, I'm Marcy Walton. If you didn't join us on Tuesday, my name again is Marcy. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am the Associate Director of Residence Life for Xavier University. Prior to Xavier, I worked at Loyola Marymount University, Santa Clara University up in the Bay Area, and then right before Xavier, I was at Loyola Chicago. So glad to see those folks here. So just wanted to let you know that last time I have two dogs. Their names are Ignatius and Francis because I'm like all in on this Jesuit thing. They were crying so hard that I was distracted the entire time. So just wanted to let you know that they are right next to me. In fact, Frank, come here, buddy. You want to say hi? Come here. Oh. So this is Francis. So if I go off screen for a second, it's because they need managing, but he should be quiet the whole time. So he's here to hear about feedback as well. Awesome. Okay, so for this session, you are going to need pen and paper. Usually I have a pretty robust workbook, but obviously we're all virtual here. So if you want to take just a second and grab, pen, pencil, scrap piece of paper, go ahead and do that now. I'll give you just a minute before we go over our learning outcomes. Okay, I'm gonna quickly go over these learning outcomes. So hoping to help you identify some personal triggers that have the potential to shut you down to criticism or feedback. Learn how to flip a previous example of feedback that maybe at the time you're like, that's not helpful, I don't love that. So you can be kind of more proactive with how you approach feedback this year. And then also learning how to proactively navigate those future feedback conversations to better kind of position yourself towards growth. So there we go. So I am going to try to make this as interactive as possible. When I have done these workshops before, people are up and moving, we're getting in small groups, we're doing partner sharing, and I realize there are some limitations, but we will be using polls, asking you to type in a chat, doing some personal reflection activities where I will go off camera, as well as a breakout room to keep the session dynamic. So I do want to let you know that anybody who contributes in the large group by coming off mute and sharing some of their thoughts are going to be entered to win a prize. I'm no dummy. I know that putting yourself out there in a shared virtual space is pretty vulnerable. So I do want to reward folks for that. So just kind of keep that in mind and maybe push yourself to respond when maybe you wouldn't have otherwise. So the concept of feedback is something that I've been working towards probably my whole career. I was really bad at it as a new professional. It really threw me for a loop. So I started doing some research, and this concept of feedback is like sharpening your pencil. It can be a little challenging and sometimes perceived as painful to kind of shave away bits of yourself, but in the end it gets you closer to your core. If you've ever been writing with a pencil and then you go and sharpen it and you're like, oh my God, how was I writing? How was I existing in any other way? That is a pretty good metaphor for what we're about to go through with this session. So just kind of keep that in mind. And I also just really like this PowerPoint template. So that was a part of it as well. So why this topic? About probably 4 years ago, I was just noticing a lot of things, especially in online spaces, like the Student Affairs Facebook page. Somebody would just like slightly challenge someone and it was like their world exploded. Also just seeing a lot of white fragility, a lot of male fragility, straight fragility, like just basically like all types of intersections of people really not doing well when just a slight piece of their worldview was challenged. It really made me think about the field as well as feedback. Because in my experience supervising professional staff for, oh my gosh, six years now, like nobody teaches us how to receive feedback, right? I'm sure we've been to sessions or trainings or we've gone over the evaluation process, and everything is about how do you provide feedback, right? Like you want it timely, you want to give examples. Maybe it's the compliment sandwich. But I was working with somebody in my first job where I was supervising professional staff. And he constantly said, like, give me feedback, I'm open to feedback. And then when I would, this huge wall would go up and he would be defensive. And he would switch the conversation to what he wanted to talk about. And eventually I said, when I'm having a one-on-one with you, I literally feel like, Wonder Woman, where you're like, pew, 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 and like they shoot it back. I'm like, that's what it feels like when I'm trying to give you feedback. And he got understandably upset and said, well, Marcy, nobody has ever taught me how to receive feedback. And that was a huge realization for me of like this, we are failing graduate students, young professionals, entry-level professionals. And then also as I transition to mid-level, I'm getting feedback all the time. I am getting feedback when I send an email, when I make a decision, when I say something in staff meeting, and then I see my hall directors all on their phones, and I'm like, they're talking about me in the group me. All right, that is definitely feedback. And I would say I now in mid-level get far more feedback now compared to my entry-level days. And that was a really rough transition. So hopefully I want to be able to give you some really tangible tools so you are able to approach that well. So all of the items that I'm sharing today are from this book. It's called Thanks for the Feedback. When I was doing my research, I saw a couple, and then I saw this title, and especially the asterisk. So it's the science and art of receiving feedback well, even when it is off base, unfair, poorly delivered, and frankly, you're not in the mood. And I'm like, all right, these are my people. If I was going to write a book, that would be the title. So this is what it looks like if you're looking for a really helpful read. Douglas Stone and Sheila Heen are both Harvard business professors who do a lot of research on kind of like the soft skills of business. They wrote the book Difficult Conversations, if you're familiar with that. And from that, they're like, oh, there's an entire subset of information based on feedback. So if you are willing, and there'll be lots of times to do this, to pop off of mute and share some of your thoughts or your reflections, I will be giving one person, and I'm going to be taking notes of who it is who's talking during the time. Every time you talk, that will be an entry into a raffle to win this book. I will pop over online and get your mailing address, and one of you in the group today will get this book. So there is your motivation to share some of your thoughts. So the first thing that I would like to hear from you all is, we're talking about feedback, but would love to hear your definition of it. So if you could take 30 seconds to personally define feedback, and then go ahead and type your definition in the chat so we can kind of see, what people are thinking when we're talking about feedback. Feedback is a gift when done correctly. Oh yes, if we were in person, I had this great activity where I gave everybody a present and then had types of feedback responses of like, well, this would have been great 5 months ago, but I don't want it now. So a feedback, definitely a gift when done correctly. It involves a reaction or thoughts towards person's performance. Yes, there's definitely a performance component. Feedback is love. I love that construct rather. Worry when it stops. Yes, sometimes not receiving feedback is in and of itself feedback. An opportunity. You guys, you should be doing this session. I should not. It's an opportunity to be in community with somebody else by sharing your values and your ideas. How somebody or something interprets your efforts, of course, yes. Feedback is receiving small splashes of paint that when placed together creates a masterpiece. I'm like having a moment now. You all are wonderful. It's a resource which helps you excel effort, skills, awareness. Feedback should be specific, continuous, positive, and constructive. Doesn't need to be the sandwich method, absolutely. Feel free to keep typing if you are mid-thought. I'm gonna go ahead and go to how the authors of the book that I mentioned define feedback. So they define it as any information that you get about yourself, which is, if you think about it, really broad, right? Any information you receive about yourself. And because of that, it's how we learn about ourselves, our experiences, and from people. It is, when it's boiled down, how we learn about life. And notice that there's no value associated with this definition, right? Like, we're not saying that feedback is inherently good or inherently bad. It's information. When we get information, we put it through our lenses, our identities, our values, how our parents brought us up, and then we assign it value through those lenses. So something to kind of keep in mind. So what is feedback? It's not just what gets ranked, it's what gets thanked. It is what gets a comment. Maybe you get invited back to a space or not invited back to a space. It is a topic that maybe gets dropped. It can be both formal and informal, heard that in your definitions. It can be super direct or implicit. So somebody saying, I didn't like your presentation is direct. People rolling their eyes and being on Facebook right now is implicit feedback, right? Both is giving me information about my performance. It can be super blunt or it could be really baroque. And it can also be super obvious or very, very subtle. So one of the concepts that I absolutely love from this book, especially as I'm thinking about my role as a supervisor, and for all of you, whether it's grads or RAs or professional staff, is the idea that pull beats push. So training a manager how to give feedback, how to push somebody more effectively is helpful, right? Like, I want to provide you this feedback that maybe you don't know you're doing, or this is how I could see you do better. That is effective to a certain point. But if a receiver isn't willing or able to absorb that feedback, there's kind of only so far a persistent and skilled delivery can go. I'm sure you can think in your mind maybe of a student leader where you're like, I'm doing like all the tricks, right? Like, I am being student-centered, I'm providing examples, I'm not getting super emotional, I'm engaging them in the process, and like, it's not happening because they ultimately are in control of how to absorb feedback. The receivers are in control of what they let in and not, how they make sense of it, and whether or not they decide to change. So I'm going to do a quick activity, and if you want to follow along on your own, great. I can't see any of you, so there's no like accountability here. But they talked about kind of a good metaphor is taking both of your hands kind of in the prayer position. This hand is the person providing feedback. This one is the one receiving feedback. And if we push at the same time, my hands aren't going anywhere, right? You can't really see, but I'm struggling. I need to work out. Struggling. We're not going this way. We're not going this way. We are staying in the middle, and eventually both of us are going to be exhausted. Now, if you do that again, person providing feedback, person receiving feedback, the person receiving feedback is ultimately in control. So watch what happens when I'm coming with feedback, I'm taking it the way that I want to, and then we're getting back to the middle. Because this person is ultimately in control of whether or not they resist or they use that momentum to become even better. So thinking about being in control, absorbing the feedback that is beneficial for both parties. And the thing about pull versus push, pull beats push, because it helps us to recognize and manage our resistance to feedback, helps us to engage in feedback with curiosity and courage instead of condemnation or judgment. So saying, it's the difference between saying, you know, that's not what I meant at all, you're reading into that. That's sort of like condemning the feedback versus, oh my gosh, I never thought about that. That's really interesting. Can you tell me more? That takes courage, and that also takes a level of curiosity. Additionally, it helps us to find some insights in order to help us grow. So like you to think about these blue lines right here. So research from the book that they did shows that feedback-seeking behavior has been linked to researchers to, and you don't have to type it in the chat, just kind of think to yourself, do you think it's higher or lower job satisfaction, more or less creativity on the job, faster or slower adaptation to a new role, lower or higher turnover for a job, and then an employee seeking out positive or negative feedback, excuse me, is associated with higher performance ratings. So take just a second to think through each one of those. Okay. So research shows somebody seeking out feedback, even if it's negative, is linked to higher job satisfaction, more creativity on the job, faster adaptation, lower turnover. They're more likely to stick around the company or organization. And seeking out negative feedback is associated with higher performance ratings. And I really had to kind of sit on that for a second. But then I realized, okay, if one of my hall directors came to me and said, listen, I know I'm doing great in a lot of ways. What are all the ways that I can improve? Where am I not meeting expectations? How can I go above and beyond? Like, I want a whole team of that person, right? That's awesome. Instead of constantly being met with, that's not what I meant, the RA is out of their minds, you know, that wasn't late, things like that. Those are the type of people that we want, people that are focused on their growth and development. So with that in mind, I have found if I've done this presentation, oh my gosh, probably 10 or 12 times by now. And one of the defaults that people bring to it, which is understandable, is that they constantly think about other people of like, oh, when I delivered that, that's why they reacted that way, which is helpful. That's, you know, good for making meaning. But also want to challenge you to think of yourself as somebody who is receiving feedback. So just kind of, you know, hold space for both of those. Don't just deflect and think about other people, think about yourself. So the three main kind of components of the presentation are based on three different types of triggers that the authors found in their research. So truth, relationship, and identity. So we will go ahead and get started with a truth trigger. So a truth trigger is set off by the substance of the feedback. So when somebody gives you feedback that is just straight up wrong, what is your reaction? You know, is it confusion? Is it anger? Is it distrust? Because the actual feedback is wrong. The substance of the feedback is not helpful. It's not true. So maybe we feel indignant. Maybe we feel wronged in some way. Maybe we feel exasperated. And when the substance of the feedback itself is not accurate, we perceive it to be wrong or untrue. The authors observe that most people go into a phenomenon called wrong spotting. So we spend all of our energy disproving the feedback instead of focusing on the message behind it. And some of the ways that we wrong spot are like, straight up, that is not true. 2 + 2 does not equal 5. What is wrong with you? It used to be right. So like the director 2 times ago, that was right, but it's not right now. It's right, but according to the wrong people. So like, I'm sure this decision does make sense to a vice president. It doesn't make sense to an 18-year-old. The context is wrong. So like, yeah, I make fun of my hall council president and they give it right back to me. Like, it's our relationship. You don't understand that. The feedback is right for you, but it's wrong for me. So, you know, we have different daytime attire. It's okay for me to wear a hoodie when you need to wear a suit. I don't need to wear a suit. So good for you, not for me. The feedback is right, but not right now. So like, yes, I agree with you. I need to do that better, but I was with a student at the hospital until 4 o'clock in the morning. So like, I'm not dealing with you right now. And then anyway, like, you know what, it's just unhelpful in some other way. So I would like for us to consider the following situation. You have been working on a very challenging project for several months. This isn't a work setting. You are, you're really pushing yourself. You are working harder than you have a really long time. And you give it to your boss for some feedback. What would you want them to say? So I'm going to show you 3 different options. All right. Working hard, pushing yourself, boss gives you feedback. What do you want to hear from them? The first one is, oh my gosh, thank you so much for your hard work on this project. It is such a great start. Keep it up. Good job. Pat on the back. Okay, that's option 1. Option 2 is, whoa, this is a really good start. You have come a very long way. Here are some really specific things that you need to do to take it from good to great. Or, you've gotten a lot of work done. Let's take a look at how this matches up with the original goals of the project to make sure that you are staying on track. So take a look at those, and then I am going to hopefully launch a poll. So go ahead and vote. Which one of those would you like to receive? These are so interesting to see in real time. Okay, about 14 of you have voted. You want to get in your final votes here? Give you another 2 seconds or so. Okay, good. One person said the first one. That is usually the last one. All right, gonna give you 10 more seconds. Looking for 4 more people to vote. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end polling. Hopefully you can see that. So one person, thank you for being brave. Basically was like, thank you, good job, keep going. 59% or 10 of you were the second one, so that seems to be the winner. And then the last one had 6 people. Oh, sorry, I forgot to share results. There we go, sorry about that. So 1 person had the first one, 10 had the middle, and then 6 had the last one. So I am interested in hearing from you all. So why did you choose the option that you did? How do you think you'd react if you got one of the other pieces of feedback? And let's just stay with those 2 questions. So why did you choose the option? And how do you think you would react if you got one of the other pieces of feedback? So this is the opportunity to win the book. So if somebody wants to go ahead and come off mute, I'd love to hear from 1 or 2 people.
Hi, this is Tom from Loyola University in Chicago. I chose the second one because as much as I know that the compliment sandwich can be unhelpful, I think it's what I often like to hear, in that I want to hear that I did something great. I want to hear on something I can work on, and so that I can, feel good and feel like I have something that I can work towards. If I would have gotten the first one, that would have been great. And if I would have gotten the third one, um, as long as it's constructive and I feel like I can see the benefits of it, I think it's fine, but doesn't make me feel, validated.
Mm-hmm. That validation when receiving feedback is so important. Thank you, Tone. Let's hear from another person.
I can share. Oh, Miranda, you just come off of mute. You can also share.
Sure. I chose the last option. I think I don't necessarily, for me personally, I don't want the praise just yet until I know that the work that I've done is actually useful and helpful. And so I want to first make sure that it's aligned with what I was actually supposed to do. And if it's not, then give me that feedback to help me get there, so that when it is actually a finished product and you say good job, then I feel like trust that a little bit more because you have done the work to help me align it correctly.
Excellent. Thank you. And then I think I saw Taylor try to hop on. Taylor, do you want to?
Yeah. I just didn't want to cut off Miranda. I also chose number 2, like Tone said. I think I like the idea of like trying to provide excellent work, or to like meet the goals of whatever that means is important to me. I think if I would have gotten feedback with 3, my ego would be a little hurt. Because I think to me, my first mind is like, why would you assume that I wasn't already trying to match up with the goals of the project? So I think 2 is easy for me to decenter my ego and say, okay, how can I be better? And 3, I think for me insinuated like, okay, I think we should go back to the drawing board.
Mm-hmm. Almost like a subtle dig, right? Of
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
this is good, but like, let's go back and look at that rubric or the expectations or whatever. So thank you for those 3 people for sharing. Not going to chat through this, but just taking note that there was at least one person in each of those 3 different areas. So thinking about, working with a team, I kind of call this like feedback love language, right? Like you're likely to give feedback in the way that you like to receive it. But if you are, for example, the person who is like, great job, keep up the good work, and then suddenly we're looking back at expectations, that could be like pretty devastating for folks, right? So developing a language around this is super helpful. So the first one was appreciation, the second one was coaching, and the third was evaluative feedback. So appreciation is basically like, I am seeing you, I'm acknowledging you, I want to connect, motivate, thank you for your work. Coaching is a little more about like expanding the knowledge, sharpening a skill, improving capability. This one is where I see a lot of student affairs feedback kind of falling, both kind of acknowledgement, but also skill building. And evaluation is really about going back to those standards, aligning expectations and helping to inform decision making. So knowing that you may receive feedback in a way that you don't want or is not helpful for you. So we kind of, when it's a truth trigger, thinking about what's under the label. So looking back is like, here's what I've noticed, and looking forward is here, here's what I still need you to do. So if we're looking down here, data is going, you're receiving data, you're interpreting it, you're putting a label on it. I heard that from some of you of like, well, I don't want to be seen as, not knowing what I'm doing or things like that. And then we get to, well, is this advice? Is there a consequence for this? So if you are receiving coaching feedback, ask yourself, if you do want to follow, or frankly, if you have to follow the advice, how do you do that? Asking questions that look back. So like, what did you observe about me, the world? What matters to you, supervisor? It seems like maybe I'm not aligning with that. I asked this question of my boss. She's the senior director for student affairs. What can you see that I can't? What is going on that I don't have a concept of that is helping inform this position? And then also looking forward, what's your advice? Can you put it in your own words? How would you implement that? Show me, model it, give me an example. And then if you're getting evaluation feedback, really clarifying the consequences and expectations that follow. So looking back, what's the criteria? What was important? Are there concerns? Are there skills or experiences that I'm missing? Can we get me there? And then also looking forward. So if this is a performance evaluation, that's kind of a traditional form of evaluative feedback. Well, there are consequences. Am I not getting a merit raise? Am I not getting to chair that committee next year? What should I be thinking, working on? And then this is the most important one that I think we're not, frankly, very good at. Well, when can we reassess? A lot of times feedback just kind of hangs out there, and we don't have an opportunity to come back and be like, well, have you seen an improvement? How am I doing in this area? So the next portion of truth triggers, if you are the person receiving feedback, is that we leak information all the time. We are constantly giving information out to the world that we often don't even know that we're doing. So I want to go through some of those. So this one, your face. Okay, I know this conceptually, but when I read this in the book, it blew my mind. Who can see your face? Everyone. Who can't see it? You. Unless you're on a Zoom call, which is why I think Zoom calls are so weird, because you can see yourself. But the amount of times where I'm like, oh my God, what is my face doing? And also knowing that a lot of that interpretation is coded through identity, right? Like, like bitch face, things along those lines, or she gave me a dirty look, or he wasn't paying attention. A lot of those interpretations can absolutely like be coded. Also our tone, also I knew this, but what to read it is different, because of the structures of the bones in our ear, and how we process information. Our voice literally does not sound the same to us as it does to every other person in the world. If you have ever heard yourself on a video or a voicemail and you're like, oh my God, is that what I sound like to every person in my life? That is mortifying because it doesn't sound the same way, right? I see this a lot with sarcasm of like, oh, that didn't sound as mean as I think other people interpreted it, because your tone is literally different than everybody else in the world. Oh, okay. And then patterns. We have big patterns in our life that are sometimes comically obvious, is how the authors describe it, but it could be like a blind spot for us. So an example, I asked for feedback on how I was presenting one day, and people are like, you use your hands a lot and it's distracting. And my immediate response was, no, I don't. And then they're like, all right, well, the next time we're gonna record you, or we're gonna do like a tally mark, and I was gesticulating wildly. So comically obvious to other people, we give them information that really we may not understand. And then finally, email or text body language. You know, if somebody asks you a question and you say yes, period, suddenly you're mad at them, versus yes, smiley face. That is a totally different interpretation of literally the same word. And then also, they call it email body language. So when you CC somebody, that is providing feedback. Or if your boss is CC'd on an email, you're getting feedback as well. So thinking about how all of those behaviors kind of layer together. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next piece of truth triggers. This is one of the most helpful tools in the whole book, and we're gonna go through this together. So it's the idea of a gap map. So basically the gap map is how I mean to be seen versus the way I am actually seen by other people. Because, well, I'll just go through it. So we have, we think and feel in specific ways about situations, about values, about expectations. And because of our thoughts and feelings, we form intentions. What I intend to do, to say, to accomplish, to behave in a certain way. And then that goes into actual behavior, okay? So I go from what I'm thinking and feeling, what are my intentions in this space, this is how I'm going to act. But the tricky part is that people only see starting at behavior. They have no concept of your thoughts and feelings or your intentions. They only see starting at your behavior and how it impacts them. And then that becomes the story they tell themselves about you. And the rough part about this is that their story about you comes back as feedback, which often bears little to no resemblance of who you think you actually are. So I'm gonna go through this with experience in my early career. So I thought and had very strong feelings that I needed to be a visible presence in my community. I did not just want to be somebody that was from 9 to 5. That's why I wanted to be a live-in role. I wanted that presence in the community. So I set an intention that if I had the capacity, had the energy, wasn't otherwise occupied, I was going to try to spend some time at my front desk after hours to be seen as approachable. So, a couple times a week, I was hanging out for a couple hours at the front desk. Not the whole night, not all of the shifts, not every single day. But what I didn't realize is that the desk staff and the RAs of all of the other buildings started to pick up on that. We had desk workers that worked at a variety of buildings. So they started to compare and contrast and then complain to their hall directors. They're like, well, Marcy's at the desk all the time. How come I never see you? So I didn't even realize this, but I ended up impacting my peers because they felt like I was setting them up to be somebody who wasn't approachable because their behavior wasn't matching mine. And then their story about me became that I was like a suck up and a goody two shoes, and that I was trying to make them look bad, which had no cross section of my thoughts and feelings, that I just wanted to be available in my community, right? So what I want you all to do, hopefully on your paper and pen that you have, if not, go grab it, is to complete your own gap map. So think about a piece of feedback that maybe was tough for you to hear, you disagreed with in some way, and fill out your gap map, and kind of trace that feedback path from your thoughts and feelings to the person's story about you. So thoughts and feelings, intentions, behavior, impact, and story. Some people find it helpful to work in reverse, so starting with somebody's story about them and then kind of tracing it that way. Other people do it the way that I just did. Okay, so I'm going to give you about 4 minutes, and I'm going to go off screen, so you're not just like staring at my face doing nothing. Hopefully I can do that, or maybe not. So go ahead and do that. I'll stay on here because I can't figure it out and it's giving me anxiety. Okay, go for it. And if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. This is your 1 minute, I'm peeking around the corner there. 1 minute warning. Okay, go ahead and bring us back. Would anybody love to share their gap map with the group and be super brave and take us through those kind of 5 pillars of feedback?
I can share.
Great.
Okay, so my thoughts and feelings were that I wanted to be a dependable and reliable person, and to be seen as hardworking. My intention was to show up consistent and like positive all of the time. So my behavior was participating in like large group discussions and making sure that I had like done the research or homework or whatever I needed to do in order to show up competent. My impact on them, I think, was a feeling like making them feel as if they were like less than or I was not showing up authentically. So their story about me was that I like do not practice like vulnerability or authenticity, and like appeared to be perfect and did not give other people the space to not show up perfectly.
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you so much. Not everybody would be brave enough to do that in a shared space, so thank you for that. So how does it feel to think about this person's story about you compared to your thoughts and feelings of, going through that particular behavior?
It was definitely disheartening. I think for me, it was really difficult to reconcile someone telling me that I think that I'm perfect when I know very much is not at all my own self-perception and not what I thought I was putting out there.
Mm,
And it was really hard feedback to kind of grapple with or really understand, especially as a Black woman,
mhm.
and knowing that the identities of the other person were from like more privileged backgrounds. And so knowing like there's so much there to tell me that I am not giving them the space to show up authentically when their
Right,
mere
right.
existence made it hard for me to even show up at all.
Mm.
So yeah, it was definitely loaded and layered and really hard to take in.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear that on so many different levels. Again, thank you for that. And hopefully the people who were listening and engaging thought about that as well. We say, Student Affairs says, intent versus impact all the time. I think this helps us parse that out a little more. I've done this session with RAs before, and you can just sort of see like the light bulbs going of like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And also helps you kind of like live with yourself a little more of like, I know what my thoughts and feelings and my intentions were, and yet the impact was different. So maybe thinking about a different way to do that or a different way to talk through it can be really helpful. So the authors really encourage us to think about some of our patterns outside of your leaky face and your leaky tone, and making sure that you have both honest mirrors and supportive mirrors in your life. And what they mean by that is not like have a lot of mirrors decorating your house, but really think about who in the people in your life will be straight up brutally honest with you, and who is going to be a little kinder, a little more supportive, and work to become self-aware enough to know who to go to in that moment. So I know I have two friends. Nate is my honest mirror and Carmen is my supportive mirror. And if I need a reality check, I go to Nate. If I have done a lot of work and I need to feel a little more supported, I go to Carmen. Talked about this before, but recording yourself. So the example in a book is that somebody got feedback that she, in a committee meeting, was shooting down every idea that people had. She did not believe it. She ended up recording herself and could hear how it was being perceived by others in a way that was not possible when she was in the moment. Focusing on changing from the inside out, easier said than done, right? So if you are getting feedback that people feel like really disrespected from you, it's not that they want to feel respected. They want you to actually respect them, right? It's not about being performative. It's about changing some of those patterns. So those are truth triggers. We're going to transition into relationship triggers. So these are tripped up. You get tripped up by the person who is giving you that feedback, right? T talked a little bit about that, especially how those layers of identity come into that. The relationship is colored by the feedback is colored by the relationship between the giver and receiver. And we can have reactions based on what we think about that person, as well as how we're treated by that person. So the quote from the book is that our focus shifts from the feedback itself to the audacity of the person delivering it. I like to call this like the clutch the pearls moment of how dare you? How dare you be the person who gives me that feedback? So again, it's about the audacity of that person giving it. So I would like you for just a second, you don't need to necessarily write this down unless that helps you process. Think about a skill or a competency that you know you need to work on, okay? Maybe you know it internally, maybe you've gotten feedback on it before, but like, whew, I have got to work on meeting facilitation, budget management, responding to mental health crises, whatever it is, make it work related. Okay. And I am going to launch a poll. Basically, I would like you to think about, I'm going to give you a list of people thinking about that skill. Who would be the hardest person to hear really critical feedback about from that, about this skill? So if I received, I need to work my budget management, if my co-associate director said it, nah, okay, yeah, I agree with it. If the vice president of student affairs, oh my God, that would maybe feel different. So thinking about that skill, who, oh, and if I can get the poll to come back, there we go. Who would be the hardest person? Okay, hold on. Polls, I need to switch it. There we go. All right, launch polling. Who would be the hardest person to hear critical feedback about that skill from? Your division head, supervisor, director, indirect, a professional colleague, someone you supervise, someone you mentor, campus colleague, maybe somebody in the diversity office, academic advising, stranger on the internet, somebody you don't work with but really respect in the field. Or, oh man, if my partner or like my mom told me that, that would be really hard. Okay. Votes are still coming in. Got about 4 more people. Go ahead and get those votes in. So far, not a single person has said stranger on the internet, so that's helpful. All right, 2 more people. Give you 5 more seconds if you want to vote. All right, I'm going to end the poll and I'll be sharing results with all of you. So it looks like 3 folks said division head. Only 1 person said direct supervisor, which I find to be very interesting. Tied for the lead are, a colleague, a professional peer, or somebody whom you supervise. And then a couple people said somebody you respect in the field. And 3 people said, oh man, getting from a partner or family member would be really, really rough. So I am interested, why did you don't have to share the skill necessarily unless you're comfortable doing so, but why that person, especially like over all the other people who are in this zone, why that particular person would it be so hard to hear that feedback
Um, I'll go.
Thank you.
I chose supervisee because I think I got more feedback from my supervisees, my RA supervisees, more so than any other time in the short career that I've had. And I just think we live in this work culture where it's just very taboo for your supervisees to give you feedback. And so I want to encourage it, but I also to feel the tabooness of someone who I'm supposed to be a leader for, who I'm supposed to mentor, I'm supposed to do all these things for, giving me feedback on my job. Cause then I'm like, okay, where's the hierarchy here? Again, not to like want to reinforce it, but like it makes me feel unsettled as their supervisor when I'm being given feedback.
Fair. Thank you for that. Could hear from 1 more person if you're feeling it. If not, we can move on.
Sure. Can I?
Yeah.
Awesome. So I chose that last option for a family member or a partner. And I chose that one because I think at work, from all of those other people, I'm kind of expecting that. So if you're above me, if you're working around me, like I'm expecting, especially if we're on a team, that you will want to give me feedback so that we can operate as efficiently and effectively as possible. And so I think I also, just from my short time in this profession have just kind of gotten a little bit hard-hearted, and don't necessarily expect people to care about my feelings when giving feedback. And so I've developed a little bit more of a resistance to that, or at least a little grace. But I think with family members or partners, I think I'm expecting, like, you know me, and you want more than just wanting me to be a better person, but you also know the hurt, and you know a little bit more of the story. And so getting feedback from them can feel really hard, because it's just like, hold on, I got enough people around me who I know I'm asking for or receiving feedback from. I need you to be in my corner. And so yeah, and I know that's also maybe not fair for that person, because they should be able to talk about what they what they feel they should give me. But yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. That's a different layer of relationship, right? Again, thank you both for sharing. Keeping that in mind, because the same type of feedback, just based on who is giving it, can really land for you differently. And if you start to kind of piece out and pull apart why that is, you'll become even better at receiving it from whomever it comes from. So the next concept I want to go over, again, I know I keep saying it's my favorite, but like, there's so much good stuff in this book, I just love it, is the idea of switch track conversations. And if you have ever worked with student staff members, you're going to be nodding your head vigorously the entire time I go through this. So it's the idea that there are two different conversations going on. So a supervisor said, hey, your monthly report is late. And then the supervisee says, well, you don't appreciate my tough duty night. And now suddenly, two different conversations are happening. The supervisor's trying to talk about the monthly report, and the supervisee goes, whoop, no, I don't want to deal with that. I'm talking about my duty night now. And this is what we're doing, because I feel like you, so sorry. I feel like you don't appreciate the time I spent with, a student in crisis last night. So kind of parsing this out, we receive feedback. We experience some type of relationship trigger. So it's maybe, I don't feel supported. You've never been a hall director. It's been 20 years. You're the one that put this policy in place, and I'm the one that has to deal with it. And then we change the topic to how we feel about it. And then suddenly we're talking past each other, frankly. So what helps in those situations is to spot the two topics. So my hall directors, even though we've done this presentation a lot, still do it. It's human nature. Give each topic its own track. So, when somebody does that to me, I'm like, you know what? Sounds like you really want to talk about this duty night. We're going to talk about it for about 10 minutes. And then the last 5 minutes of the conversation, we're coming back to the monthly report, okay? You're not going to get off the hook of it just because that was rough, because all of this is part of your job. So let's debrief clearly what you need. But we're also going to come back to this, okay? So I would like a volunteer to be my supervisor, and I will be the supervisee. So I would like for you to give me feedback on a late monthly report. I'm going to role model what switch tracking looks like in practice. And supervisor, whoever you are, your goal is to keep me on topic. Easier said than done. So who wants to be my brave supervisor? And I will call on somebody if nobody wants to volunteer.
I'll do it.
Awesome. All right, Miranda, give me that feedback.
Yeah, so Marcy, you're late on your monthly report. What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I know I'm late, but I know that you often don't look at those until a couple of days later. So I just have a lot of stuff going on. So it just slipped my mind. So I'll have it done by Friday.
Okay. I know that there's a lot going on. But can you tell me why? What other things are going on that you weren't able to then get to your report? Because it's due at this time every month, and so I just want to make sure that I'm understanding you well to support you.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a pandemic. I don't know if you've heard. So that's a lot. And I just feel like my RA staff is imploding. and like, my mom was sick, and like, working remotely, like I don't even know what day of the week it is anymore. And like, to be honest, it's like, I know it sounds weird for you to like be coming down on me like so hard, because the last time, like, I know that you didn't read it until like 3 days later. So honestly, like, what's the big deal?
Okay, I hear you. So what can I do to help you then make sure that these reports are being submitted on time? Whether I read it or not, I might need to forward that on to my supervisor. I might not necessarily need to read that in the moment, but we're still asking that of you. So how can I help you to make sure you get that in on time?
All right, Miranda, kudos. I wish I knew where you were so I could give you a high five, pandemic notwithstanding. So yeah, if you can do the clap emoji for people, because I was being a pill. Miranda, what was that like for you to kind of keep me on track and not let me whoop all the way around?
It felt actually kind of normal, if I'm being honest. I think the students in general have a lot that they're coming into the workplace with. So I think it's also just being understanding of that, because I know that for myself, I've been in that position before of wanting to have a little bit more of like, can you hear what I'm also trying to communicate to you as you are trying to give me feedback? And so just as what you're saying is a value, can you also validate me as well?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think when hearing you, it's like, okay, you're telling me that you have more going on, and that's very much so. You're trying to get me to hear it. So then if I need you to do something and you're telling me that something is preventing you from being able to focus on it, then instead of me trying to just say, okay, don't tell me about your feelings, keep going back, you are telling me about it. You're telling me what I'm asking. It's just maybe not directly linked. And so it felt very much, yeah, it felt kind of normal / comfortable and in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, thank you for doing that again. Again, thinking specifically about like a supervisory relationship, a lot of those triggers come in what we think about that person. Do we, think that they are skillful? Do we think that they have good judgment when they're giving me the feedback? Credibility, like they don't know what they're talking about. I've been here longer than they have. I know better than them. And trust, like I don't trust your motivations for, whatever reason. So it's not only what we think about that person, but then also how we're treated by them. So do they see our efforts and our success? Do they appreciate us? Are we given appropriate space and control over, kind of our own autonomy? And then acceptance, do they respect or accept who we are right now in this moment? Not who I could be in 6 months if I get my act together, but do I feel accepted by them right now? We're going to skip through this activity, but just something to kind of think about. And this will be on the Google Drive, so you can do this on your own time. But something to think about is kind of rating your supervisor. This is not my current supervisor. She's fabulous. This is somebody I've worked with before. How would you rate this person on all of these different zones? And then what does that say when you receive feedback from that person? Okay. So just something to think about. There's a blank one, so maybe you can print this off and do your own. So when thinking about relationship triggers, they recommend that you kind of take 3 steps back. So the first is you and me. How do we intersect? The second is a role clash. So, I'm a brand new supervisor leading this committee, but you led it for 6 months while we were doing the job search, and now like we're weirdly clashing. Or, the bigger picture. What are the players, the structures, the processes that guide our decisions? So again, what does the feedback mean in terms of preferences, assumptions, identity, styles, rules between us? Do our roles make it more or less likely that we're bumping into each other in some way? And what are those kind of broader systemic processes, structures that are, kind of contributing to that? So taking kind of, feelings, emotions, all of that sort of personal stuff, and taking a step back and seeing it from a system. And then circling back to me. What am I doing or maybe not doing that's contributing to this? The benefits of a systems lens is that it's more accurate. It can help move us away from needless judgment of that person. So it stops us from going from, people in the main office think to those jerks in the main office always. We focus on the behavior and not judgment of the behavior. And then it can also help us enhance accountability, because you can't take responsibility for causing a problem unless you understand kind of what led to that. So that's the kind of relationship trigger module. For our last half hour, we're going to go into identity triggers, because not all feedback is about the substance of the feedback or the person giving it in terms of our relationship with them. Identity triggers are about us. We can feel overwhelmed, we can feel ashamed, we can feel really off balance. We're kind of unsure of what to think about ourselves. We're unsure maybe what we stand for, because when we experience that, a nuanced discussion of our strengths and weaknesses is not in the cards. This is sort of fight or flight mode. It can be very personal and very, very nuanced for us. So an example I'll provide: in my first job, I was there for 4 years total. In my in my first year, there was a third-year hall director who was really, really well respected on campus. He identified as a straight white Catholic man. He had the president's ear, which is pretty rare for a hall director to have. So it's sort of like, all right, if you can get in with Charlie, you can kind of go places, or he would kind of make connections for you. So he pulled me aside in my spring semester and was like, Marcy, I've seen the great work that you've done. I've seen, in committees or working with your team. Is it okay if I give you some advice about kind of like culture on campus? And I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, tell me all your secrets. And he said, well, I really feel like people would take you more seriously if you wore high heels. I'm even saying out loud now, years later, and like my rage is bubbling up. That was solely about being a woman, right? Like male presenting hall directors were not getting that feedback about what types of shoes they should wear to work. That was solely because of how I identified with my gender. I could not tell you what I said in the moment. I wish I could. But again, a nuanced discussion of my professional strengths and weaknesses, not in the cards. I am only thinking about this identity now, okay? So thinking about, because we are in survival mode, and that's really where I was in that moment. So knowing that feedback and identity definitely overlap in a lot of ways. I would like for you all, again, on your sheet, to go through this quick activity for, let's do about another 4 minutes or so. So if you want to draw 2 circles, choose 1 or 2 of your identities. Maybe you don't want to extricate them. So maybe race and gender, for example, you're like, I'm a Black woman, I can't, pull out one of those pieces. Talk about some, characteristics, or maybe who you're expected to be in those particular identity roles. Thinking about some feedback that you have experienced in your past, and then how do those intersect? So, you need to smile more. To a woman of color or to a Black woman can feel and land very differently to people who do not share that identity, okay? So just quickly sketch out, this is just for you. We're not going to be sharing this. Just a moment for you to reflect of how identity and feedback overlap. So go ahead and take about 3 to 4 minutes to sketch those out. I'm going to move to the side so you're not staring at me the whole time. Go for it. 1 minute warning. You got 1 more minute to wrap up the Venn diagrams. Okay, gonna go ahead and bring us back. Hopefully that was a helpful reflection for you. People that I've done this workshop for have also said like, this is coming with me to my next one-on-one. I need my boss to know that if I get feedback about, XYZ, it's going to land for me differently, and I'm going to need to process it differently, or have more time, or, have more examples, or have a heads up that it's coming. I'm going to fly through the next pieces because I do want to get to these identity triggers pieces because I think it's really helpful to think about. So I'm going to launch a poll, and the poll question is here. Let me get here. Emotional hardwiring. So, all right, launched. What percent of happiness, according to brain research, is hardwired? What percent is based on our interpretations or our response? And what percent is left up to circumstance? So, what is hardwired based on how your brain works, how your chemistry works? How much is based on interpretations? And how much is like, you know what, if it's raining today, it's going to feel different than if it's not raining today. Go ahead and vote. All right, looks like about 12 of you have voted out of 20. And a couple more, 3 more people left. You got 10 seconds. Okay, I'm editing the polling now, sharing results. So interestingly, one person thought, happiness is 75% hardwired. 8 people said 50% hardwired, and majority of you, interesting, said 25% hardwired, 50% of kind of what you do with that information, and then 25% is circumstance. So let's see if you would win on Price is Right. All right, so according to their brain research, 50% of happiness is hardwired. It is how much serotonin you have. It's how well your brain synapses do at, crossing those chemicals around. 40% is kind of what you make of circumstances, how you interpret things. And then 10% is just circumstance. If I received this feedback yesterday, I would have been fine, but like it's super humid today and my hair is doing weird things and I'm not feeling myself. So I'm going to hear that differently because like I'm in a cruddy mood today. So the idea is that everybody has a different baseline because of that 50% of where when we react to feedback, the arc looks different. Everybody also has a different level, like a swing. So that's how far up or down you go. As well as how long that emotional swing lasts. And if you're like, what the hell are you talking about? Don't worry, I have graphs, okay? So this is what we're talking about, all right? So up on this axis, we are super happy and effective. Down here, we are unhappy and ineffective. This is kind of where we are now. This is later. And let's say that most of the time I'm pretty even keeled, right? I'm right in the middle. This part right here is where I get feedback. I dip down, but I come back pretty quickly, okay? So maybe that's me. But what if you're a person that just starts off lower because of that brain chemistry? It's the same dip, it's the same arch, it's the same J curve, but now they are way down here, super unhappy and ineffective. Additionally, maybe I start up real high, I get tough feedback, and I go down, and wow, I stay down. My friend Carmen, who I love, she affectionately calls herself Eeyore because she takes stuff to heart and it takes a long time to get over. So that's if you're, pretty high up on the graph. What happens if you start low? You are totally, quite literally off the charts, but that could be the exact same feedback as someone else. So what I would like you to do, I'm going to move back just a second, just draw these L's, draw 3 of them on your paper. And what I would like you to do is chart yourself that horizontal line. So where are you most of the time? Are you down here? Are you way up here most of the time? So you're going to draw 3 of these, as well as what is your baseline, okay? Draw the L and draw the baseline 3 times. Okay. If anybody needs more time, put it in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going. It's so hard to tell. I hope I'm giving you enough time. Okay. So we're going to do identity trigger activity. What's going to happen is I'm going to give you 3 scenarios. That's why you have 3 L charts. And you are going to draw how far down would you drop and how long would you stay there. So if I'm here, that would be a big dip, but I would recover real quickly, or a small dip for a long time. So here's the first example. You have a particularly challenging duty night, which keeps you up to 5 a.m. As a result, you sleep through your alarm, you miss an important committee meeting. Your committee chair, who's an indirect supervisor, maybe not your assistant director, but a assistant director, pulls you aside later in the day, and says they feel very disrespected from you that you missed the meeting, and they feel like they can't trust you with a committee project. So where would that take you? How far down and for how long? All right, the next one. You've been working really hard to get more organized in your day-to-day work. You've got some systems in place. You feel like you're improving, but you're having lunch maybe with your fellow hall directors, and one of them, you mention your new systems, and one of them scoffs, rolls their eyes, and says, "Yeah, right, I'll believe you're organized when I see it. I'm still waiting on that email response to something I sent 2 weeks ago." What would your graph look like? How far down and for how long would you stay there? All right, and the last one. You are working to support a student through a very complicated Title IX situation. You're getting conflicting instructions from your boss, the leadership person on call, and now the Title IX coordinator. So you follow the instructions of your boss. When you update everyone via email, the Title IX coordinator replies all and gives you feedback in that moment that that was not the right course of action and you need to change it, and it needs to happen right now. So what would your reaction be, and how long would you stay there? Okay, so if you want to grab your phone and take a picture of this real quick, I'm going to send you to breakout rooms for about 5 minutes to discuss this in smaller groups. So indirect supervisor, professional peer, Title IX coordinator, basically which scenario took you down the furthest, the biggest dive, and which kept you down for the longest before you made it back up. Okay, so if you have, oops, sorry. If you haven't already, go ahead and take a picture. And I'm going to send you all to breakout rooms. And I will see you back in about 5 minutes. Accept the invite, Tim.
Can I be a rebel and not go to a breakout room?
I mean, who's gonna know?
You?
I'll just tell your boss. How about
I
that?
miss you. How are you?
I miss you too. I'm good. Hold on. I want to do an alarm so I don't forget.
Okay.
Start. Okay, go ahead.
You're such a good presenter. Here's some feedback.
Is it even across weirdness? Because I can't see any of you?
Yes, 100%.
Okay,
Even
good.
across weirdness of Zoom, you're still like, you're crushing it.
Oh, good. I'm like sweating. I'm upstairs in my parents' house and they have a little window AC unit, but I have to turn it off because it's really loud.
Right.
So I'm like, Jesus Christ. Like, is this nerves or AC? Like my like I have my capris are like all the way up, so they're shorts now. So I'm just like, oh my God, dying.
And you're like, please, Lord, give me a lo-fi camera so that no one can see the sweat.
See the sheen. It's nuts. It's nuts.
No, you're great. I think especially like the hardest thing is like, especially when you're doing a PowerPoint and no one's on camera and all you see is just your PowerPoint and your face and you're like,
cool.
is anyone even there?
And again, like everybody can see my face, but I can't. So I'm constantly like, oh my God, your eyebrows, get control of them, girl.
Right. You're like, this isn't a phone call. Remember that people can see you.
Everybody can see me. Oh, so how are things? Single occupancy, I hear.
You know, things are things.
If it makes you feel any better, so Renee from Marquette, two things. They're hosting the DNC, and housing.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Marquette. I mean, they've got it. It's gone from like 25,000 people coming to Milwaukee to like 1,000, but they're still housing 1,000. And the building that 80% were supposed to stay in had a pipe burst from a contractor last night that cost $500,000 in damage.
Last night?
Totally wiped out their Wi-Fi system. Went through 10 floors. They get there in 2 weeks. So I'm like, oh my God. And I'm just flashing back to the Baumhart flood that happened while I was there. I was like, I know what that's like. But also like, how much, like, was it the water main to be able to go through 10 floors? I'm like, did they hit it and then like leave for the weekend?
How many floors did Baumhart do? I mean, it was just one room or like one.
It was 4 or 5.
Okay. Because it was just like it was one section of, it wasn't like an entire floor, which this is like, what did you say? How many million?
$500,000. 50 grand a floor. So it had to be multiple rooms.
It's like that, you know, it's that kind of stuff that you remind yourself of. It's like, things are fucked up. Things are
like,
shitty, but like today my mantra is like, I'm getting paid. Like even if all of the shit that I've been doing for the last 2 months is thrown out the window because we changed course in a week, I got paid. I got paid all summer, and you know, it sucks. It was all for nothing, but it was for a paycheck, so I got paid. So like that's how I'm trying to like, shit sucks, but got paid.
Broadcast. 1 minute warning. Yeah, we found out yesterday that there's a recommended 14-day quarantine for anybody coming to Ohio, which is cool because RA training starts in 12 days.
Yeah.
So
we found that out last week. They added Kansas to the list today. And so our RAs have to be here on the 27th if they're from a hotspot state. If you're on the 27th. And some of the RAs are like, I can't.
Yeah.
And we're just like,
change all your plans. Go.
Right. and then like some of them are like, well, my address says that I'm from this state, but I've actually been hanging out with my grandma in whatever state.
Right.
And
that's
like,
what we're doing now.
Like, it's like we can't confirm anything. So
yes. Yeah, it's all up to chance. Okay. Go off mute. So
okay. Bye.
Because I'm bringing them back.
Love you. Miss you.
Okay. Love you. Miss you. Bye. Welcome back, everybody. Just making sure everybody comes back. Hopefully you had some quick but helpful conversations. Looks like we're waiting on, let's see here, a couple more rooms. People are coming back. So again, I think this is a super helpful way to think about things, not only for ourselves, but also hopefully there was a little bit of disparate answers in your group to be like, oh my gosh, no, I wouldn't have reacted that way at all when thinking about providing feedback to people, understanding that we have a different starting point and also how far down we dip, but also, you know, how long we stay there. So hopefully that was helpful. I want to spend our last 10 minutes or so thinking about how to have some of those tough conversations and what the researchers have found have been most helpful and most effective. So being prepared and being mindful, knowing how you react. They have this idea called inoculate yourself against the worst case scenario. So let me take you through this. My worst case scenario is that I do something so bad that I get fired and I have to live with my parents again. That is like, that's worst case scenario. So then when I go in and my boss is like, you know what, your emails could be like a little tighter. I'm like, got it, easy, check, not a big deal. Also being aware of what's kind of happening for you physically in the moment. I tend to get a cold wave wash through me when I'm getting tough feedback, and I know that's a trigger for me. Separate the strands. So what am I actually feeling in this moment? What is the story this person has about me in this moment? But truly, what is the actual feedback? What is that? So working to kind of separate those out. And also knowing that feedback is not in a bubble. The concept the authors talk about is that our stories about ourselves that other people have about us shadow box with the past. So like, yeah, I've gotten this feedback from every boss. Or like, I've never gotten that before. And that can be really a different type of challenging to hear. Also working to contain the story. So knowing that you can't change the past, and what's going on right now influences the future, but does not determine the future. Also being specific, asking them to be specific, but also to, you know, to yourself of like, okay, I know I'm bad at managing my budget. Just because I'm bad at that doesn't mean that I'm bad at my entire job, nor does it mean that I'm going to be bad at budget management forever. Additionally, changing your vantage point, thinking about yourself kind of like, all right, if I was observing this conversation, would I be as upset? You know, in 5 years in the future, would I be upset? You know, there is nothing like a global pandemic to put things in perspective of like, yeah, that was kind of a, you know, not great way to word that email, but like, I'm healthy, my family's healthy, I'm gonna kind of let that go. Additionally, and this is, trust me, so much harder to accept and internalize than just, you know, a screen on a PowerPoint. But knowing that you can't control how other people see you. The authors encourage you to have compassion for that person. Again, so much harder in practice. But you know, maybe that person is doing the best that they can in this moment. And like, I'm sad for you that this is your best. But I'm going to try to have compassion that you're trying to do this in a way. You know, some of those words you talked about at the beginning, this is a gift, this is love, this is shared values, really thinking about that. And also working to find what your trigger patterns are. So what is your internal voice telling you? That can help you like kind of diagnose what's going on for you. So internally, if you're like, that's wrong, that's not helpful, that's not me. Okay, truth triggers. That's what's happening right now. Don't switch track in this moment, right? Don't bring that into this. Relationship trigger, you know, after all I've done for you, after all I've done for this department, you know, who are you to say XYZ? Or like, you know what, lady, like you're the problem, not me. That's probably a relationship trigger happening. So thinking about how you articulate that. And, you know, maybe if this is an identity trigger of like, man, I screw up everything, I am doomed to fail, like, does this make me a bad person? Or some of those like specific cultural feedback pieces could also go into this for you. So if you're having those conversations You know, that great question that I use a lot, what's one thing that you see me doing that gets in my way? You know, what are you seeing from an outsider that I could change that I can't hear myself? Listen for some themes of like, all right, I'm consistently getting feedback about not being organized in lots of different ways. Maybe it's not about that specific sentence they use, but about a broader theme. Asking what matters to them. I think this is something that was hard for me to conceptualize as an entry level, of like, sometimes my job was to keep my boss's boss off my boss's back. Sometimes it was like, can you please just meet this deadline so I don't have to deal with it from the person ahead? And that helped that relationship. Also knowing that if somebody is giving you advice or giving you feedback, you don't have to like do it automatically, but try it on mentally is something they talk about. So like, all right, what if I did do that differently? What if I did run my staff meeting differently? And then maybe you do it for a week and then you can decide, no, I like the other way. I gave it, but at least, you know, you gave it a shot. Also coaching your coach. So this is something helpful, you know, talk about this presentation, talk about an aha moment you maybe had. Something that I do that my boss knows now is that if she's going to give me some tough feedback that she knows is going to be, you know, emotional for me, she will provide it to me in writing the day before. So I can read it, I can process it, I can like feel all of my big feelings. So then when I'm in that conversation, I'm not muddling through the feedback, her, the topic, and how I'm feeling about it. So coach your coach of how to receive that. Write out that J curve. You know, all of you didn't stay down, hopefully forever. You eventually pop back up. So knowing that based on the feedback, you could be down, but then pop right back up, or you could be down for a little bit, but you will eventually go up. Additionally, clarify the purpose. You know, is this appreciation? Is this evaluation? Is this coaching feedback? You know, is this negotiable or is this a directive? Manage that conversation. And also knowing if they had this great imagery in the book of, okay, I'm experiencing a trigger, truth trigger, relationship, whatever. Is this an assistant for me or is this a bodyguard? Is the trigger telling me something about how I'm receiving this and helps me walk through it? Or is it stopping the feedback at the door? Because that is not super helpful. Also knowing like it's totally cool to assert what has been left out of like, you know, that monthly report was late, but I ran into the director in the hallway and they said it was okay. So that's something, you know, maybe information that you don't have. You know, problem solve, what are possibilities, what is underlying interest, what are some different options, and then closing with commitment. So saying like, all right, what does progress truly mean moving forward? When can we come back to that? We unfortunately don't have time for a last activity. We were going to do a feedback conversation, but maybe you can, you know, do that over a happy hour or, you know, lunch with a friend or something. But I do want to close with feedback commitment. So if you like, totally optional, but you are invited to complete a short reflection going to tinyurl.com/Jesuit feedback 2020. And then in the future, I will mail that back to you at a date of your choosing to help you reflect on your learning, maintain that learning on the topics discussed today. So feel free to pop over there. Normally, again, we're out of time. I'm so sorry, we're right at 3:30. I would want to role model you providing feedback to me on this session. So you can please feel free to email me, you know, find me on Instagram or Twitter, both critical feedback and helpful feedback of ways that I can do this presentation in a way that helps you learn and grow even more. Hopefully you've done it a little bit, hopefully. But this is also my first time doing this virtually. It's always been in person. So if you have suggestions of how that could be done more effectively, I would love to hear it. And then the last thing is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 times somebody popped in to provide their rationale. So Tim Martin, you're the first person on my screen. Can you pick a number between 0 and 7? Oh, you're in the chat, sorry. The number is 6. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Congratulations. Miranda, you are the book award winner. If in the chat you could send me a private message with your mailing address, I will get that book out to you shortly. And thank you so much, everybody. That's the last of it. Again, this is recorded and tons of resources will be on that Google Drive. Thank you so much and best of luck with the rest of your year. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. Let's see.